are in exploratory mode and need to learn about you, learn about what you're doing, and then understanding that this can be a big part of a solution to getting buy-in from your audience, but it is always part of the solution. It's part of the solution in the digital space, and it's especially part of the solution when you take it in context of the physical space. On the digital space, your website lives alongside of social platforms, email distributions, listing sites that could drive referral traffic, the digital component of news sites, newspapers, and various newsletters, and that sort of thing. When I think about this, I think that tactically, over the last 9 months, a lot of us have had a crash course in from COVID-19 in relying more heavily on our websites. Hopefully, as we were talking about with Melissa and Mary before we brought everybody into the chat room, hopefully by spring and summer, there'll be some return to normality. But I think there's going to be some components of what we've been doing that continue beyond this. So some lessons that have been learned will continue with us more broadly in society and in the world that we're in here today. And I think if you go next slide, Melissa, this was the initial stop point. If there's any kind of questions, probably not yet, but I'd be happy if anybody has one. Okay. All right. I'll ask, how do you get the most out of your website? And the way I like to frame this is, think of your website as a home base of sorts for you on the internet. Think of the other things that you all leverage when you're trying to get your word out digitally. And I look at them like this. Mark Zuckerberg makes the rules on Facebook, and in the next coming months and years, Congress and DC might change the regulations in those social environments. People can set spam filters so they never see a message that has the word unsubscribe or donate in them. So you might think that emails from a distro are getting to people, and sometimes they just aren't. Google is constantly redefining the secret sauce that drives where you show up in search results, and digital marketing can be prohibitively expensive from time to time. At the end of the day, your website is where you have the home field advantage. So you've got to think what function you want it to perform for you. And if I could go to the next slide. There we go. So we looked at leveraging your website, and I think this is a good place to say that it begins with the end in mind. So when you think about what your website does for you, I've already said it, and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it again at the end of the message. Communicating the mission is mission one, and then probably in a very close second are driving donations, and I'll kind of defer on that because Mac's going to take a deeper dive in that aspect. You might look to be gaining volunteers, have site visitors refer you to other visitors. So there's a lot of things you might want your website to do for you. As you do that, you go through and you need to catalog all your digital and physical comms channels. From here, you're able to look at points of existing and potential connectivity. This is where I pull a term from the military that's very applicable here, and that is mutually supporting fires. So when you think about your website, you can look to see, is it in sync with your print efforts? Is it in sync with strategic speaking engagements? And eventually you end up with a balanced strategic communications approach that gets your message out there as cleanly and holistically as possible. Sometimes the website will reinforce a piece of print media. Sometimes a speaking engagement gets reinforced by a website. So the loop of reinforcement can go in different directions, but at the end of the day, they all need to be pointed in the same direction. We talk about researching the tools. The existing tools that folks have can get dusty. Sometimes a tool that was good a few years ago might need to be replaced. And tools get introduced over time. One that comes to mind is an integration that some folks use called Calendly, that essentially lets a potential donor or a site visitor schedule time to speak, and it disintermediates steps in a typical historic process to synchronize calendars and make time to happen. So there's always opportunities to make something simpler. At the end of the day, it all comes back to, though, communicating the mission and having a narrative that you're threading. If you put functionality like Calendly or subscribe to my blog or integrations like that first, you can lose the message and lose the narrative. And then you, once you kind of have a game plan set up and have expectations, you'll want to drive traffic. As I said, your website is your home field advantage. So you want to bring people to you. That can be in the form of SEO, search engine optimization. You have the emails, the text message integrations, the blog subscriptions. Digital marketing for some folks is an option. Like I said, that's an easier mathematical equation for law firms a lot of times than it is for nonprofits, but people do know what's out there. And then the last thing I'll say on this before I kind of turn it over to Mac is the next level of difficulty, but it still is a piece of leveraging your websites, is where you possibly have integrations for organizational functions and bringing in efficiencies. This can be harder because you essentially have to get the folks in your organization that wear a marketing hat and the folks in the organization that wear an operations hat to row in the same direction. But if you run a store or have to organize volunteers or have to, there are different integrations, and that's a custom, unique story, person to person to person, organization to organization to organization. But it is definitely an aspect that I like to point out is once you've got the fundamentals down, there is that next level of operational direction you can take. Melissa, if you go to the next slide. And then I will say if there are any questions for me.
Yeah, Dan, we have two questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, most nonprofits have a minimal budget available to upgrade their site. So what changes should you target if you have 2,500, 5K, 10,000 available?
I'm going to answer half of that question now. And then half of it, we actually have a piece after Mac's done that will kind of answer that more directly as far as the strategic environment out there and what things cost. But what I will say is words are free. That costs $0. So getting the message right, getting the verbiage right, making sure you're not giving someone a 8-page book report when what they need is 5 salient sentences or 2 salient paragraphs, and being clean. Another, I won't overdo it, I promise, but another example we pulled is Napoleon's Corporal. So essentially finding somebody that doesn't know what you were trying to accomplish and pull them in cold and say, what do you think of this? And see what they do, because that's what you can do. That's the free piece. The next piece is, and again, I would love to say, come to Beam and Hinge and we'll see what we can accomplish with you first. But the next piece is photography, making sure that you've got some engaging graphics on your site. And then I'll talk a little bit more at the end about, depending on what your budget is, there's some different options for upgrades. But content and photography, you want to make sure you nail what people are seeing. That can live pretty successfully in a 5-year-old, 6-year-old design.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other questions, we got two more questions that came in, and then we'll go to Mac. But one of the other questions was, how do you balance competing priorities for a website? So I want to donate now, front and center of everything, but program staff want client services, front and center of everything. So where's the natural balance in that for your website?
So the balance doesn't have to be exactly at the same place for different organizations. That discussion is easier when you are on the front end of redoing a site, because you don't just jump into having somebody that went to art school design you a beautiful site. The beginning is a discovery where you want to catalog priorities, understand all the goals, understand all the content that needs to be brought to bear, look at logical architectures, because anybody can look at, call it a Mr. Potato Head, call it a multi-headed Hydra, but you can tell when you're on a site that has had different priorities from competing components of an organization all hang their thing on. You get the navigations across the top that have a dozen options, and then people that lost that argument are in the footer, and there's lists and there's lists and there's lists. It's like that. And the place that is more often the case is if you look at municipal sites or people that are large, because everybody's got a vote. In this world, get the message straight, get the funnel straight, make sure you have that. And then you can cleanly put people to other sections of the site that go to organizational goals or other things, volunteer, there's ways, but preserve the, we call it the MMA, the main marketing area, but think of the homepage, fold it like a newspaper, and what's above the fold, that's precious. That real estate is precious. There absolutely should be a donate button front and center, but that only takes a little bit of space. It needs to be a nice bold color, but use the rest of that space to get your message across. Everything else falls out after that.
Yeah, so Latasha Tace Walker asked a question that you just answered, which is where should the donate button be and what color should it be? So I think you said, do you have a specific color you would recommend or just bold?
It needs to be obvious to the visitor. And from that, it depends, because depending on your color scheme, or if you're a Clemson or a South Carolina fan, you might say orange and you might see, but it needs to be obvious and it needs to fit. You don't want to have a very subdued and have a gigantic orange button, because then it's out of balance. But if I get there, it's like I said, some people go to your site because they got a business card and they've already been convinced at lunch.
Right.
As long as that person can easily get to the site and be like, oh, there's the donate button. They just bypass the message because they were already sold.
Yep.
So
that makes a lot of sense. So it's safe to say that it shouldn't be like flashing red and white, donate now, donate now. It should definitely align more with your organization's logo.
exactly. Because, and I forget exactly how I worded it two slides ago, but them donating is a byproduct of buy-in. So donate now. I don't think that works. And again, Mac's next. That probably didn't historically work before the internet was a thing, right?
Right.
Not to say Mac was doing this before the internet was a thing, but I'll turn it over to him for next.
Okay. We have two more questions, but I think you guys, and to respect time, we want to move on to the next, and we'll save these questions. Does that work?
Sure. I mean, we're only budgeted. There's a good 20 minutes at the back end of this, so that way
Okay.
we can make sure to to keep on making some progress.
Okay. Perfect. All right, Mac.
So not to date myself, but I do remember where I was 35 years ago. And have y'all lost me? I'm having
No,
internet connection issues.
we can still hear you.
Okay. So I am dating myself a little bit. And then about 15 years ago, I spoke to AFP, and I used the example of my son, who at that point was at Clemson, and how many texts he was sending a month. I couldn't understand how a kid that's in engineering school at Clemson could be sending 4,500 texts each month. So things have changed over the last 15 years. But Dan and I are trying to make this as practical as possible. So I'm going to start by picking up on a couple of points that he made a moment ago. And one, and I'm going to put them in the form of questions, is how often do you visit your website and your donor portal to appreciate or understand better how often your donors, what their experience is, whether it's a clean, easy experience or a challenging experience, as as they move from your website to a third-party processing website. So that's one question that I'd like for you to think about as we go through the presentation. The other is, how often do you ask someone that's not associated with your organization at all to look at your website, not just the donate part of your website, but your entire website, to give you feedback about how it integrates together, and is the brand and the message and all consistently developed throughout your website. So think through that process, because I think it really is important. We get very content with what we have or what we see every day or what we know is out there. And part of our responsibility as fundraisers is to always understand what our donors are experiencing. And part of that experience is your website. Part of it is you going there and being critical about what improvements need to be made to your website in order to give your donors a good experience when they come there. So let's go to the next slide, Melissa. And what I'm going to try to do is, there are 5 points on here, and then I'm going to move into recurring givers. We could spend 15 minutes on any of these points, but I was just trying to give an idea of some things that we see in the fundraising world as a consultant in the fundraising world, some things that we hear, we see, that we know work as they relate to our electronic footprint. So just going to go through these pretty quickly, but as clear as Dan mentioned moments ago, how do you make your value proposition, and how do you reduce friction? Those are the 2 critical things about the experience on your website. So what's your content? How are you presenting your content? How are you maintaining your brand throughout your website? And then how are you making it easy for people to navigate? Leslie and I were traveling back before Christmas, and she was trying to make an order on her phone. She was trying to buy a Christmas present for someone on her phone, and she got really frustrated with the website that she was using. She immediately thought it was her phone. And I'm like, no, that's not your phone. That's just a company that hasn't spent a lot of time thinking through your experience when you come to their website to buy a product. Making a contribution to your organization is just like buying a product. They are investing in what you do, and they need to have you need to present them with as few barriers to making that gift as possible. So how do you decide? Giving should be easy to initiate on, if not every page of your website, all of your main pages of your website. There should be a menu bar. Dan can get into this more technologically than I can, but you want to make it available to your website visitors at any point when they are motivated to give to your organization. You want to make it easy for them to do so. You do special events. So lots of times people aren't going to come to your special event, but they may want to donate or become a donor to your organization because what your special event may be doing to support the mission of the organization. So there are a lot of other examples, but how are you thinking through the process of bringing people constantly back to the donate page so that they can easily make a contribution? Clearly inform your prospective donors about ways to give. Back when I was being tested for the CFRE, we used to talk about the 7 ways to give, and they were stocks, bonds, life insurance, cash, write a check. That's how we typically thought about giving.
we still have him on the phone as a
I th-
backup?
I think we do.
Yeah, back up. I apologize. I have never had this problem before, but so just thinking through the how they access your information on your website, and easily making it available for them to do so. Ensuring the messaging is consistent across all your channels, that something Dan's already talked about, but your brand's really important, and what you do is critical, and it needs to be consistent, whether they're seeing it at an event you're hosting, on your website, on your printed material. Really critical that when they come to your website, if they've seen you somewhere else in the community before, there's a natural understanding that this is the same organization. How do you use your online donation platform that makes it easy to give? Again, Dan mentioned that things are changing all the time, and you may be using an old portal, an old third-party relationship that needs to be upgraded. So again, that constantly participating by going to your website and understanding what your visitors are seeing when they come to your website. And then finally, segmentation. You can collect a lot of information on your website, intentional and strategic about how you're using that information. Don't collect information that you're not going to use. So you need to think completely through the process. Do we need their birthday? Do we want to know what they're interested in that our organization focuses on? You may know that they're a first-time donor. So how do you use the information that you're gathering to market back to these individuals, to these potential donors, to make it easy? I know 15 years ago when we were getting Young Leaders Society started at United Way, we asked them for their age. Well, that doesn't help you when you're trying to figure out, are they still of age to be in Young Leaders Society, which cut off at 40? We should have been asking for their birth year. So we had to go back and redo that. So think through what you're asking them to present you with so that you can use that more effectively. So let's look at the next slide.
Matt, can I ask you a quick question really
Sure.
quick?
Yeah.
One of the things that actually Elizabeth asked was, when you have multiple campaigns that people can donate to, right? So let's say you have a capital campaign, or you have a campaign for this cause and then one for this cause. Should all of those go on different landing pages, or should they all go on the same page?
That's a great question. I believe that they should all, Elizabeth, I believe that they should all go on different pages. Otherwise, you're going to distract your donor. And that decision process is going to be very difficult for them. So you want to drive your capital campaign donors to your capital campaign landing page. Recurring donors, which we're going to talk about in a moment, very, very important that you don't get them distracted to other things. So Dan, I don't know if you've got an opinion about that, but I would recommend that you have separate landing pages for events, for your recurring donors, paying, if you're doing a campground.
The only thing I'll add on to that is there is a certain aspect of it depends. An example is a community foundation that's got a fund for every county, or they've got a general fund that they're trying to drive more donations to, so they have more flexible dollars at their disposal. You've got to understand your constraints and what story you're trying to what story you're trying to tell, and then think through the conversion funnel on your site for each of those funds. You do want to have, not always top right corner, but let's just say top right corner of the site, a donate button. So what does that do? That goes to a place. Is that place that might be a form that then has a drop down on it, which is your donate options. You are still reducing friction in that point to take someone from a non-donor to a donor. And you're giving them their options on the back end. Whereas you can also drive them through the funnel from the homepage that maybe lists sites that are being focused on a COVID-19 relief fund, which takes you to a link that talks about the fund, and that donate button can then take you to the same page where COVID-19 relief fund has been pre-selected as what are you donating to. So there's different ways to do it, and different organizations have different constraints.
Yeah, and I just like to pick up on that. Right hand top of the page, I think, is critical. I deal with a lot of different financial institutions on a personal basis, and all of them but one have the information that I want to use to navigate their site at the top right-hand side. And one of them has a bar going down the left-hand side, and I hate it because I'm used to the consistency of always seeing that information in the right top corner. So think about what people consistently like to see and try to develop your website around that consistency and not putting things in creative places that make it more difficult for them to find. So Dan just talked about funneling people through your website, and I'm going to kind of turn it back to basic fundraising 101. And it was really important, and appreciate it being a January program, because a lot of you have just experienced year-end giving, where you probably had prospective donors that were converted.
Mac, I think we lost you again. And thank you guys for bearing with all of the lovely internet issues that the wonderful state of South Carolina has now. Look forward to them not being so challenging in the near future. Matt, can you hear me? You might want to switch over to your phone if you're able to.
Yep. Yep. Am I back up now?
Mm-hmm. We can see you, and you just need to unmute your phone. So Dan, really quick while we're waiting on Mac to jump back in, Elizabeth also had another question about stock photos versus real photos that you've taken in the field. Do you recommend using stock photos, or is it more beneficial for our websites to have photos that are from our communities of which we serve?
There's a hierarchy. So a photo from 10 years ago that was taken on an iPhone 3 that falls in the hierarchy below stock photography. There's a lot of great stock photography out there. Above that is high quality photography that's personal to you and personal to your organization. And then the last piece is there are places and ways. You don't want to have a low quality photo in your main marketing area that's kind of emblematic or featured throughout your homepage, low quality pictures of donors or key players, stakeholders, places. But there's ways to incorporate inside of a photo frame, if you will, and essentially give a visitor a mental cue that you are now inside a photo frame and I'm looking at a photo within a photo, if you will, a photo within the website, and that can give a mental cue. And then, because you might have a photo that is low quality, but emblematic of the mission of your organization. That's better than stock photography. You've just got to be careful about how you put it on there. And if you do it right, you can do it without bringing the quality, get the impact of the picture without bringing the quality of the site down.
Gotcha.
If money was not an option, professional photography, personal to you, is always the best. But money is always a factor. So you do your best.
It definitely is. I think we're waiting a few more minutes for Mac to hop on. So one of the
Not
other.
back.
Oh, okay. All right. So Mac, you were talking about how many of us have experienced the end of a fiscal or the end of the calendar year. Was it related
back
to
with you.
donors? Yes, sir.
Yep.
We can hear you, Mac.
Yeah. So am I back?
I think we need to switch to phone.
So Dan, while we're waiting on Mac to get back on for phone, how do you recommend that a nonprofit look for a web design partner, and what is a reasonable budget?
Let's do this because while Matt gets onto the phone, we're going to go to slide number 13. And this is kind of part 2 to that earlier question about if you have 2K, 5K, 8K dollars. And slide 13. One more.
Keep going. There we go.
Understanding your options.
Perfect.
So this slide was is towards the end, but it's kind of our step through your options that are out there. And just so I don't go strictly into what I say without a question, how was the question worded again, Melissa?
The question was worded. Let's see. How do you recommend a nonprofit look for a web design partner, and what is a reasonable budget?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I hit the answer directly and not, obliquely.
Yes.
So the reasonable budget depends on your goals, and it depends on it depends on the organization. There's a lot of it depends, and I hate to just answer everything with it depends, but I'll kind of step you through these five options that are out there and let you know. So the first is the do-it-yourself option. Really, the cost here is time. The fiscal cost of DIY is negligible. $20 a year for your domain, $20 a month to have it hosted at a reputable location. So that's all about time. Maybe you've got a person on staff that has expertise. Great. Maybe you have a volunteer. So for that you'll know if that's an option for you. Then you've got freelance. And I'm trying to give pros and cons throughout here. Freelance is wildly inconsistent, but there are some great talented individuals out there. So I can't speak to the quality of any individual, but I'll say there's some very talented people. But picture that is a person that is going to do cradle to grave the discovery, the design, the development, and give you your website. It could be amazing, it could be marginal. The only downside with that person is that person, when they're done, has to go on and find their next meal. So there's not going to be a support infrastructure. They're gone. Then you have what I would call a formulaic firm. There you have typically a high quality freelance. They could probably do a reasonably sized website just on the low side. They might even be able to break into 4 digits, $8,000-9,000 because again, they're just feeding themselves. A formulaic firm, think higher quality typically than freelance, but think less variety. So there's folks out there that do They do websites for financial advisors, and they can print that site again and again and again and again. So they oftentimes can be priced closer to a freelancer. So they might be down around $9,000-10,000 for a website. Then you've got custom design and development. Spoiler alert, Beam and Hinge is that fourth one there. For Beam and Hinge, a website for a nonprofit, if priced normally, would probably be from the high teens to the high 20s. Oftentimes what we do, and what a lot of folks that are out there that work with nonprofits do, is there'll be a donation in kind to get that down into bring that down into a more reasonable cost, because folks like us can't compete with a freelancer that's only feeding himself, but we can do our best because we believe in supporting nonprofits and that sort of thing. And then the last, and there are nonprofits that are in this world, but you have your enterprise class folks that are building, this is where the web world goes into, low six-digit numbers and up. There you can think about the websites for the University of South Carolina, the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles, Blue Cross Blue Shield. So the world of websites can go all the way down to $20 a month for a Squarespace subscription, up to name your price. So for folks, and I wish I could give a hard number for nonprofits, but there are very different sites for nonprofits out there. There are sites that have clean homepage, 3 other pages, and a donate now page. And those are sites that you probably get down closer to a 4-digit number for the site itself. But there's also sites that are running a store and have a bunch of functionality and are just a much bigger organization. So cost also depends on size and complexity. And if we have Mac, we can kind of bounce back to that.
I think we have him back. He just needs to unmute his microphone on the computer.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, let me turn my phone off. All right, so let's see if we can get through this in the next 12 minutes. So just looking at the funnel, y'all are all familiar with this. The way we look at, I'm sorry, guys. There we go. So you've all had a chance to engage prospective donors in the last few months with your end of year giving campaigns. And what I really, major donors aren't developed through your website, but certainly recurring donors, new and one-time donors are. And I just wanted you to think through this process of how do we take prospective donors to becoming that new or one-time donor, and then making them a recurring donor. And the next slide, Melissa, really tells some of the benefits of approaching it this way. Why are recurring donors important to your organization? 80% of them make a gift and never give to your organization again. So how do we change that metric? We know that you can promote online giving. That's going to have an impact on your revenues coming to your organization. We know that recurring gifts typically are signed up in the first part of the year because you've just had interaction with that donor potentially for the first time. So it's really important that you're thinking through this in January, February, and March. And then really critical is we all know it, whether we're Netflix members or Sirius or whatever things that we subscribe to, it's much easier to make a substantial gift on an annual basis if you're making that contribution monthly. And it's so, recurring givers can actually become fairly significant donors to your organization because they're giving on a monthly basis as opposed to writing a check once a year. And you can see there $63 monthly gift is a $750 annual gift. So how do we convert one-time donors to recurring donors? And there are a couple of things on the next slide that I just want to go through quickly, and so we can have a little bit of time for Q&A. But recurring donors, just, we all know this. Once you get a recurring donor making a gift by credit card or bank draft or electronic transfer, Venmo, whatever the medium is that they're using, the retention rate for these guys, for that donor, is really high. So how do we make that happen? We need to streamline the donor process. So the question earlier about different landing pages, it's really important to having a landing page just for your recurring donors without distraction, with options of what that recurring donation should be. Is it $10 a month, $20 a month, $50 a month? Give them options, but also give them another. Let them fill in that if they want to. How do we reinforce their support? Maybe you have a newsletter. Maybe you put on every staff person's email signature at the bottom of their email, you put some kind of promotion for your recurring donors. Maybe you have a type of, it's a level of giving that you recognize. We typically think in levels of giving as dollar amounts, but why not create a society of recurring donors? There are a lot of ways that you can enhance it for them so that they feel special, so that they feel like they have a place in the organization. I think also approaching them as a personal donor, maybe calling them on the phone when they sign up for recurring donors, regardless of the size, sending them a personalized email that's not just a form email, but one that actually has a, am I still with you? Have I?
We can still hear you, Mac.
So I'm going to my phone. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So developing that monthly recurring, get off.
Mac, you muted yourself. You're on mute. It happens to us all the time that have to do all of these virtual meetings.
We did talk at the beginning about the challenge of virtual meetings for this sort of thing.
We're very used to it. So Mac, you're unmuted,
Okay.
so you can go.
Am I back with you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just the last couple of points. Make it personal. Personalized thank you letters, even if they're emails. And then the other thing is that you can ask them once or twice a year to increase their level of giving. So moving someone from a $10 a month gift to a $20 a month gift isn't going to hurt their pocketbook, but it will make a significant increase. It'll double their annual gift. The other thing is that I would encourage you, if you do have recurring donors, convert them from credit card to another type of giving platform, whether it's transfer, so you don't pay fees. Typically, those things are fee-less, and credit cards you're paying overhead on. So there are other things to think about with that. Let me stop there. We've got about 6 more minutes. I think, Dan, you've been through your part of the rest of the presentation. So
And
Let me
there's
stop
2 slides we
and
haven't
see
done.
what questions are in the chat box, Melissa. And
Yeah, that's what I
Mary.
was going to say, Melissa. There's 2 slides we haven't done, but we've talked around and near a lot of them. So I
Okay.
think we prioritize questions, maybe 1 or 2, and then let Mary kind of close out, and Mac and I could stay on for a few minutes at the end for anybody that has something else.
Yeah,
Has another question.
absolutely. That's perfect. We can definitely do that. And thank you guys so much for presenting. So one of the questions is, and Mac, this is for you, what are your thoughts on publishing donor lists on websites?
We recently had a client that didn't want to publish their donor list because they felt like people were taking donors from them. And I don't buy into that. I think donors that tell you that it's okay to use their name, they want to be recognized for that. I think your website is just like your printed material. If you're putting list of donors in your printed material, I don't see a problem with also showing them in your different societies or levels of giving in support of your organization. I think the upside is when people see people that they know giving to your organization, that encourages other people to do likewise.
Gotcha. So at this time, I do have a question. So as we have shifted to a more virtual platform in the workplace, specifically in nonprofits, our websites and our emails, that everyone is doing things virtually. So that's a huge shift from before COVID, when fundraising was, if you wrote a handwritten note or if you made that personal contact through an email. Some would argue that that's not the way that we should be raising money anymore, and that we need to shift to the virtual platform, whether it's on our website thanking donors or through email thanking donors. Mac, what are your thoughts on that as our future seems to be more and more virtual and not so much, I don't want to say old school, but old school? And did you freeze? I think you froze.
The short answer is you should ask your donors, especially. Am I out again?
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
The short answer is ask your donor. What is your donor comfortable with? Now that is typically more with your larger donors, but again, first question is what's your donor comfortable with? I think older people are still more comfortable with remote connections, but you can make it personal. Phone calls, the worst thing you can do is say, well, because of COVID, everything's on hold. I mean, we're running capital. I've got a couple of clients now that I'm running capital campaigns for through COVID. So you got to find new ways to keep it personal with your donors. It is still about one-on-one relationships, and whether that's phone calls, checking on them more regularly, doing Zoom calls with them. People appreciate hearing from the organizations that they support, what those organizations are doing, not just as their normal operations, but what they're doing to meet the additional challenges that COVID has presented these last few months. So they want to hear from you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that definitely answers my question. It's 12:57, so I just wanted to put this one last screen up on, or page up on the screen for you guys to see, to have Dan's contact information as well as Mac's. If you have specific questions, we're going to turn it over to Mary Dell to let her talk about upcoming programming. But want to thank both Dan and Mac. And again, they have agreed to stay on for 15 minutes if you guys want to individually ask them questions after Mary Dell tells you about our fun upcoming programs for 2021.
First, I want to thank Beam and Hinge for being with us today, especially because Beam and Hinge has made a very generous donation to our scholarship fund. And so we recognize that many people are facing different obstacles in accessing high quality professional development during COVID. And we know that part of our duty is to help address those inequities. And so I think you'll see a running theme in our programs as we plan for the year, that we're trying to bring that equity lens to all of our work. And we hope that that will provide immense value to you. In the next week, we will be rolling out our program slate for the rest of the year. You can count on a monthly meeting every month. We've got some really awesome national and local speakers coming in to speak with us and share their knowledge. And we think you'll find tremendous value in your AFP membership this year. And we thank you all for being with us again today. Feel free to stay around and chat with Mac and Dan. And if you have any other AFP related concerns, Melissa or myself are happy to help you get engaged with the chapter and expand your professional network. So again, thank you all for being here today. I'm going to turn it back over to Mac and Dan.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so like I said, Mac and I have, we can continue on if there's anybody that had a question that didn't get answered. And Melissa, you're more than welcome to share that slide deck with folks. So.
Yep, we'll definitely email it out to everyone that attended today.
Good.
And we'll just
I
hang on.
apologize for the technology glitches.
Mac, you know, the great part is that there were 26 participants at the beginning of it, and every single participant stayed on throughout the whole thing. So I think that everyone found it valuable, and we all recognize that you can't control your internet as much as you want to.
That's true. And Melissa, thank you for kind of running the question board with Mary Dell. That was very helpful. Just, you know, that's the way that worked. Having a third person that kind of is running traffic on that was great.
Absolutely.
What about, we got some people hanging out. What about questions that y'all may have?
Elizabeth, you asked a few questions specifically about, photo stock and all of that.
Out.
Do you have any, you're probably about to hit the end button, but do you have any questions for Dan and Mac?
Take her off mute. There you
Well,
go.
I do have one question. So, and I know a lot of it is going to depend on the platform that you use for the processing. When you get to, you know, you can have a separate page for various campaigns, or if you want to make, you know, a recurring thing. But our challenge, I guess, is that the software that we use, which is eTapestry, you have to change your donation frequency. There's no way for me to just make it go monthly or semi-monthly. And sometimes when people go to sign up for like a recurring gift, they don't click the more than one time because they just don't realize that they can.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for that? Should you put like a screenshot of how to do it, or
Is there a
you
way
want
that
to keep it clean?
Is there a way that you can program that they can't complete the application until they click that box?
They do, but it automatically goes to one time, and I can't change that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's something I have to take up with the
I would take that
blackball
up with
people.
I can't imagine they have other organizations that are using that haven't raised that as an issue. So I would talk to Blackbaud about that.
Yeah. We've got a couple clients that use Blackbaud. We have a lot more that are using like Stripe, Square, and oh gosh, the other one just fell out, PayPal, all of which are just options. But the one thing I do, and it to kind of jump off of what Max said, you know, reducing friction is the rule of the manor. And to me, like, even if somebody is signing up for a one-time donation, just there's no reason not to have an option box that says monthly, annually, and says one-time, reoccurring. And if one out of every 15 people that send you $20 picks reoccurring, You can then put them into a different comms channel where they're on a separate MailChimp distro, and there says, thank you, recurring givers. And it's like Mac was talking about, it makes them feel more special to the organization. But yeah, if it's Blackbaud needs to solve that for you, because I mean, the fight should be to get somebody to want to give in a reoccurring basis. You shouldn't be the technology shouldn't be fighting you from achieving that goal. Like that's.
Yeah.
One of my questions is, so I have some fundraising pet peeves that I've developed over the years, like just things where I see and I'm like, God, why? And so I'm sure that y'all have those for websites. Can you share like a handful of those, please stop doing this moments?
Mac, you got one or two? I've got a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of mine is a website designer that wants to get really creative and do really creative and cool things on a website, and they put things in places you can't find them. I really like to have a search option on a website so I can find what I'm looking for easier. Sometimes I know last month or two, I've actually had to go to the glossary at the bottom in order to find what I was looking for, because you couldn't find it in there in the way that they had set up their menu. So again, it's all about making it easy, especially for donors, to get where they need to go to make a contribution when they're looking on your website.
Yeah, I think for the two I would give you, Mary Dell, is one is verbiage and quantity of verbiage. People don't want to have to read until they want to have to read, right? So as you go through homepage, secondary page, tertiary page, you can introduce progressively more text, because at some point people get to a event post where they might want to read 500 words. But don't force 500 words when what they need is a tagline or 2 sentences on an earlier page, because that'll let folks rapidly navigate the site. As whatever as Twitter gives way to TikTok and the attention span continues to dwindle, we have to account for that. And the second thing is my version of what Mac just described. And you see this a lot on like municipal sites where the homepage is a Mr. Potato Head. It's a just this monster where every option got peppered because nobody lost the discussion on who gets to have their link on the homepage. So thinking through the construct and the architecture to have the high priority things on the first page, primary navigation, and have the rest rapidly discoverable. Maybe it's a resources link on the home page. And when you go to a resources link, people aren't surprised when they then see something that still looks pretty, but is more of a list. That's okay. But that list doesn't have to be, that can be one click away from the home page. It doesn't have to be front and center, and I think about, and the other thing I think about is for folks that come back, I think of the website, especially the types of websites that Beam and Hinge does. It is a tool 99% of the time for the unconverted. It's your potential client. It's your potential donor. So what you do is, if you've got a portal or a donation platform or something that a current donor comes to, you can a lot of times put that in the footer, because a reoccurring donor just needs to know where to go to get it, right? Like, so, and you can think about that in a lot of different ways. But if it's a place that I need to go every time, and I have your homepage bookmarked, just make it easy for them not to listen to your whole conversion message when they want to come back and adjust a reoccurring donation, right? Like, I want to take it from $10 to $30. How easy can you make that monthly donation change for a reoccurring donor without stealing prime real estate from the potential donor?
It's really helpful. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to chime in as we're wrapping up here? We're down to a small crowd of the loyal faithful.
All right.
All right, I think we are
Good to
At
see
a
you,
good
Elizabeth.
stopping point.
Elizabeth, Latasha, Kemma, the final few.
Woot woot.
Yeah.
Hey, Kemma, did your sister go to Darla Moore School of Business a couple years back? Nope. Okay. Then no. Familiar name.
Bye. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Bye. Y'all have a great
Thanks,
one.
Y'all putting this
everybody.
together. Bye-bye.
Mac, Dan, thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Dell. Be good.
Bye.